Okay, yes, nice to see everybody here. This is a great pleasure to be here, sitting in the chair, deputising, as you know, at the moment. I think we all agreed that we would we hope to get a full chair at the next area meeting, which is on the 3rd of November. I think we agreed that last week, members. So, but meantime, I shall take the chair today. It's a great pleasure. As I said, I've got Alison here with me, Alison Clark. Alison, do you know everybody that's around the wonderful screen here today?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
You do? Okay, well, good morning and once again, welcome to everybody. I think our webcast should be underway now, is that right? And is the webcast just kick in now?
Well, the meeting's been recorded.
The meeting's been recorded. Well, that is good, that's good. And are you doing the roll call? Anne, are you having a roll call?
Yes, I'll just do that now. Okay,
Okay.
Councillor Bremner.
Hi, Mr. Shaw, I'm here. Morning.
Councillor Donnie Mackay.
Present, Aaron.
Councillor Willie Mckay.
Willie Mackay?
Yes.
Yep.
Councillor Mackay.
Present.
Councillor Rees.
Present, Anne. Good morning.
Councillor Rossi.
Good morning, Anne. I'm present.
And Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Sinclair.
She's here too.
Andrew Sinclair.
Andrew?
Okay.
Yeah, well,
I
we're just...
pass across apologies, Chair, for Andrew. He may be a little bit late. He's got a medical appointment in Inverness this morning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Anne, for that. Thank you very much. Yeah, well, that's nearly a full complement, and tomorrow we will hopefully have a full complement in Wick and East Caithness, and wish everybody all the very best today. As you know, it's polling day, so good luck to everybody. Right, so the roll call we've had, and this is virtually new to me, and we shall carry on now with any apologies. We have had one apology. Okay, thank you for that, Struan. Declarations of interest, members. Have we got any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest? Right, that is good. Okay, the minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. That was the committee meeting held on the 22nd of April, which were approved by the council on the 13th of May. Okay, members? Everybody quite happy with that? Now we're moving on to the action tracker. The action tracker, as you can see on page 10, we haven't got a few action trackers to go over. Is there any update on that first one there, Struan, about the fire station support or refurbishment? Did you see that on the action tracker?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I actually put off a letter and email Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, I believe the day before I went on annual leave. So I haven't had anything back as of yet. I'll circulate the response as soon as I have one, Chair, so that will be ongoing.
Thank you, Struan, thank you for that. Okay, the Mccartney provision, that was all of us to action that, but I think that has been attended to. Am I right, members? Okay, in the Wick Common Good Fund, this was one which our previous chair, Nicola, had in mind, but discussions with officer to be progressed on this issue. Okay, that will be ongoing. And number 10, the Ward 2 and 3 members to meet separately. That has been done on the £100,000 per ward. That will appear later on in the agenda. Right, well done. Well done. Is there anybody joined the meeting that I haven't identified yet? I was expecting Anya. Anya, you joined us today. Anya Johnston, the youth convener? Not yet, okay. Right, let's move forward. Let's move forward to the police area summary.
Councillor Mckay, just before you go on,
yes.
Chair, Councillor Bremner would like to come in.
Oh, well done. That's the first hand I've missed. Well, Raymond, thank you. You go ahead, Raymond, yes.
Thanks, Wally. Just giving you the chance to be on the ball, so just testing. Yeah, in the action tracker there just now with the Wick Common Good Fund, I was at a meeting yesterday with Sarah Murdoch and mentioned to Sarah about having a catch-up brief with members in terms of particularly in terms of the Wick Common Good Fund going forward, and she's agreed to that, so we should see that coming to should see that being put out in the next, I would imagine, very shortly. So hopefully that's a follow up to that action on that on the action planner.
Thanks, Councillor Bremner, for that. Raymond, yes, well done on that. Thank you. And thank you, Alison, for alerting me. How did I miss Raymond's hand? However, let's progress, and we're going now to the police summary, and we've got Alistair Goskirk to take up the report. And let us have some information on that, Alistair, as you wish.
Yeah,
and let's hope, members, you can ask some questions by raising your hand, and I'm going to try and pick up your hand as they come forward. Okay, Alistair.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. So the latest report within the date schedule is there for everybody, and I know what's been shared in advance of the meeting. Some points I'd like to highlight. Obviously, the first priority there around road safety and road crime. It's unfortunate to report that within the period there have been 2 fatal road collisions. They are listed there. I know I've spoken with members individually about some of the circumstances around them. But as I allude to, it is one of our policing priorities. I'm pleased in some respects to report an increase in our detections around drink and drug driving, but the pleasure comes from our proactivity within that field, less so in terms of there is still a minority within the communities across Caithness that decide to drive with drink and under the influence of drugs. Some data there around detections for mobile phone offences and seatbelt offences. You'll see quite a significant reduction in the figures. Look, I allude that to over the last 18 months we've gone through the pandemic. That's seen a reduction in those that were on the roads for some time before it gradually picked up. But at the same time, there's a bit of pleasure about adherence to some of the road traffic legislation. Putting some local context around speeding, we're focusing on areas Merkel, Force and down at Thrumster, and our road policing colleagues are very much on site with that and trying to support us with those activities. Locally, I'm picking up on some concerns from the community councils, particularly around Sinclair Bay, and they've had some concerns in their area, which we're looking to address over the next wee while. Couple of points to make in there. The Festive Safety Campaign is a national campaign. We participate where we can with that. The North Coast 500 initiative, and certainly we've reported to the visitor management groups about our participation in that and how we police that. So there's kind of very 2 distinct strands for me, and one of them is about road policing and adherence to road traffic legislation. And what I'm trying to do is be a bit more agile with our road policing colleagues, basing them up here for short periods of time, so 3-4 days, for example, and working alongside some of my local colleagues. That's giving me a tangible benefit. It means I can target specific areas that are of concern to yourselves and to the community councillors specifically, but it also allows me to develop staff and bring up that kind of confidence in what we're doing. Moving forward into the acquisitive crime as a priority, some headline figures about the reduction in housebreaking, theft, particularly of housebreaking, which is positive. I want to draw your attention to the figure around theft of motor vehicles. Please be reassured we don't have someone going around stealing vehicles. I want to just put a nuance within that legislation and particularly insurance and things like that, if there's contraventions of insurance legislation, it sometimes can lead to offences in terms of take and drive away, which can build that figure artificially, so to speak. But be reassured, I do not have someone in the community running around stealing vehicles per se. But that then takes me through to an area of business that you've all been particularly interested, particularly over the last year, 18 months, antisocial behaviour, violence and disorder. Some notable figures there, particularly around the licensed premises checks, you will see is vastly reduced, but by explanation, as I have repeated over recent months, with the licensed premises being closed and then partially reopening and extending, that's the reason behind why that figure is quite different and noticeable. But our activity when we were checking licensed premises for me is positive, and I'd like to comment that just in recent weeks, again accepting this out with report period, but in recent weeks as the licensed premises have started open again, I found the relationship and the engagement with colleagues within that sector to be very positive. In terms of breach of peace and reduction in terms of reported incidents, you can see quite a positive reduction of 22. Let me put into context some of that from a local perspective. We've seen less of the disorder that you would normally associate with kind of weekend and the nighttime economy kind of culture, but what we have seen is that balance coming back up with breaches of the COVID legislation featuring in that. Can I draw your attention specifically to the number of assaults on emergency services? I don't think that's anything to be proud of within the community. You can see quite a stark increase in those that are prepared to assault our colleagues in the ambulance service, and thankfully not necessarily in the fire service, but we, and I will say this unequivocally, are taking the brunt of it, and officers have been assaulted, and I've made mention to a number of you over recent weeks about assaults on police officers. Never acceptable in my humble opinion. And you know, after all, we are serving the community, and folk are prepared to do that. Pointing out also the reduction in vandalism. Vandalism is always an unfortunate and systemic issue up here in Caithness, but it's really pleasing to report that notable difference. Our operation notebook, which targets the antisocial behaviour, particularly around residential premises, tenanted premises of our partners within Highland Council and the social housing providers. Pleasing to know that we have a few numbers compared to the population across the county, but all the same, there are issues that stem from there. Continuing with that theme, the stop and search figures are there for you. You can see quite a distinct difference, but again, please, when you're considering them and pondering them, please think about the effects the pandemic has had. But going forward, protecting vulnerable people, the data's there, prevention and intervention activity. Take a personal interest myself in a lot of the vulnerable people category, so to speak. I'm doing a lot of work up here, and I'll turn to it in a moment, around Caithness Cares. Some work I've been doing with the recovery group up here from a policing recovery group connection, and it's all about the vulnerabilities across our communities. Missing persons. The figure there obviously can't be broken down to the local level, but more recently, and I once again will stress this is out with the report period, but missing people continue to be a priority area for me up here within policing, and most recently we've had a number of high-profile incidents that have drawn interest into the community. Yes, the last section within the report around terrorism and public order, just a couple of points to note around that you know, we have continued to focus on some of our vulnerable areas, our ports, etc. They're within our patrol plans, nothing of particular concern around them. And I continue to engage regularly with my colleagues at the two critical sites, respectfully with our CNC colleagues and our Ministry of Defence colleagues. If I can add just a couple of points from myself, Chair, if you can indulge me just for a moment, beyond the report. So from a resourcing perspective up here in Caithness, and I know that one of the last committees that I spoke at, this was a question that was posed to me. So we have been successful. We've got an extra sergeant post in the establishment up here. We now have the officer in position. The officer is performing essentially a dual role where they will support the operational policing delivery on a day-to-day basis, but part of the portfolio that they will hold is about partnerships and enhancing the partnerships. And as we go into the next 12 months, there's a number of projects I would like to take forward or be participating in, and I see that officer's role as being critical to the success of keeping those partnerships strong and enhancing them. There is a resource review being undertaken currently within our division, with staff dedicated to carrying that out. I'm not cited on when it's due to report, but one of the aims is about flexing and readjusting the resourcing image picture. Essentially, are the staff in the right place? Where's the greatest demand, etc. So you'll appreciate that I can't give you much more context other than a comment that this is underway. The Caithness Cares, and I'm conscious Councillor Rossi and others who've been very much participating in all of this, has reached a certain point in the journey. I've had conversations with the chair of the partnership in terms of and how that is now going to be taken forward, and there's going to be participating in meetings with third sector and others about where we are and how we help with the continued progress and build on what was developed. And again, touching on that sergeant position, I see that role has been very much embedded in the police's participation in all of that. The Caithness strategy, so I'm conscious that my divisional commander spoke to you back end of last year, early part of the year. The Caithness strategy is reaching certain milestones, and this is an invitation. Conscious apologies, Anne, if I go off and out of your policy and your agenda for the meeting, but I'm going to offer an invitation to the members, and within the next day or so I'll be putting emails to you. We've got a couple of colleagues within the service coming up into the area, looking at how we're doing our business, looking at how they can support us with our essentially our perception in the community, and please, I would offer an invitation to you to meet when they come up, whether this is done through Teams or whether it can be done face to face here, but that will be the week after next, and I would please implore you to try and find some time to speak to them if that's okay. Also some external support coming in from other parts of the kind of policing group coming up into the area to kind of discuss some of the issues that we're having up here and how we can take them forward. Finally, we've seen a relaxation of the restrictions now. I think it's only right for me to pass kind of personal comment about, in general terms, I think that the Caithness community have responded to the challenges admirably. In terms of adherence to the restrictions, yes, I've commented over recent months about some, and I stress a minority of those who were prepared to breach the restrictions as they were laid out. Policing it has been challenging, notwithstanding the risk posed to ourselves, but I'm pleased to say that generally the return to normality so far for ourselves up here has been smooth and seamless, and nothing adverse really to report. So, Chair, thanks for the opportunity to speak there just a little bit extra. So, thank you.
Thank you indeed, Alistair, and thank you for that kind invitation. I'm sure members will take it up as well. So members, I'll be looking for questions. If you have any comments to make, just raise your hand. But I'll raise a question myself, Alistair, to yourself. I'm always looking for a question in your very interesting reports. Alistair, just a general question. Has the non-appearance of those very well attended summer festivals throughout the Highland Council area given you a wee bit of relief in some way? Has it made a difference to your resources over the summer? Because I know it's a lot to ask to attend these events, and there are thousands of people who go to them, but there's been none of them this past 2 summers now. So has it been making a difference to you in the force?
I think, Chair, if we can talk about Caithness and then the wider division first. Caithness, it's a quid pro quo, isn't it? Invariably, you might gain some relief essentially because something doesn't take place, but invariably there's something else. So actually, for the benefit of everybody, from a policing perspective, there have been a number of things in the last recent weeks, notwithstanding the very enviable visit from His Royal Highness. That's had a policing demand placed on us, and we've come through that quite successfully. So, but that has had its own challenges, so to speak, across the wider division. I'm fortunate that maybe, maybe it's not the right word. I'm fortunate that we have not had to support beyond our own boundary. But on that point, Chair, it's worth pointing out to you that there is the Worldwide Climate Conference coming up in late October, November. It's right to acknowledge that officers from Caithness will be drawn to that at some stage. I can't give you numbers. Planning phase is very much up and running. Resourcing plans are getting put into place. But to answer your question, we will be supporting events elsewhere at some point. So hopefully to some point that answers the points you were looking for.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alistair. Absolutely wonderful. Okay, I've got 3 members. I think the order is Matthew, Carl and Donny. Councillor Matthew Rees, Councillor Carl Rossi, and then Councillor Donnie Mackay. Okay, Matthew?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Alistair, good morning. Good to see you. Just briefly, you've mentioned the royal visit and COP26, which I was going to touch on. That's done. Very concerned to see that stark figure about assaults on emergency services workers. And I hope Sheriff Berry takes a dim view of it, and I'm sure he will. I want to concentrate really just asking and talking very quickly about road safety, which has usually been the #1 concern for people in surveys. There were 2 other accidents that did not result in fatalities in the recent times. The schoolgirl at Merkel, who had a narrow escape, maybe would be the best word for it, and also just this last weekend, the accident on the Forth Strait, which are both on the A836. Going back to the Forth Strait issue, when I first became a councillor in 2013, Lord Thurso, John Thurso, handed me a petition from a number of local residents expressing concerns about that road. I think there were about 140, 150 signatures on the petition, and summarised, because time is short, I have spent the last 7 years trying to get something done about the Forth Strait. I have asked for possibly double white lines, for consideration of a speed limit, or warning signs, or even a simple hazard warning centre line down the centre of that road. And I realise it's a current case, but having gone past the Forth Strait at the weekend and seen the marks left over from the road accident, it was easy to understand that that incident had taken place right by the houses and the people who live there. And I think it could have had a different outcome, like every road accident. And really, for my members' benefit, all my attempts to try and get some road safety measures put in there, they have all failed. The ones that are the responsibility of the council and our road safety officers have been really helpful. That basically, it doesn't meet the criteria or the matrix for a lower speed limit or double white lines or anything else. So I've also been asking for a number of years, as you know, Alistair, for the camera van to go there. And this is really what I want to emphasise. I've tried again in recent days. It is completely ridiculous, but the matrix under which the camera van operates from Transport Scotland basically does not allow us as local members or even community councils to say, please could we have the camera van outside, for example, Wotton Primary School or Mount Pleasant Primary School or on the Forth Strait. I am convinced that with the traffic going to and from Vulcan and Dounreay, it would only need to go there 3 or 4 times a year perhaps. The deterrent effect would be immense. And arguably, more importantly, for the local people who live there, they would see that the authorities are doing something about it. But we are unable, and Police Scotland are unable, to get that camera van deployed to places where people largely, I think, would like it to be, rather than at the Mound, for example, in Sutherland. And I suppose I'm really just saying this because in terms of what I would term local democracy, there is none. We're unable as a community, and the police are unable to get that van to locations where people would, I think, like it to be. I'm really just making that point. And as I say, it is not within Police Scotland's control, really, to change the rules, but the rules could be changed. But despite 7 years of trying, that hasn't yet happened. And secondly, and sorry to be slightly depressing, folks, but I also spent a couple of years trying or suggesting that there should be a small road policing unit based in Caithness, perhaps only 2 or 3 officers, certainly not a 24/7 unit. And my argument is quite simple. If there's a unit at Fort William, which is 60 odd miles from Inverness, then it makes sense to have a small unit, arguably based somewhere on the north coast, to tackle the problems that we've got. This received support from local policing, Police Scotland, from within N Division, but unfortunately I was told recently at the top of Police Scotland, within the executive, the idea has not been supported. And I think it's really difficult, having only received an email this morning or yesterday about an increased police presence on the Force Strait, that these officers are having to come from Dingwall, 100 miles away. I still think there's merit in having some local facility, and I'll continue to try and assist with that. Having said all that, just really emphasise my absolute full support for the work that the officers are doing, and we've never been better informed, Inspector, than what you're managing to do. And as I always say, in my day, there was a chief inspector and a superintendent sharing out the role that you now had to do by yourself. So a huge thank you from me. And a final detail point. I notice, and this is slightly light-hearted, but only slightly, there is only one ASBO on the go. And I recall many years ago getting my knuckles wrapped for suggesting that perhaps ASBOs were a very top-heavy and bureaucratically intensive form of getting something done. And I just wonder, do you feel ASBOs are maybe past their sell-by date, or are they still effective? Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me rather a long slot. Thank you.
Chair, if I can respond. I think the chair's frozen. If those that can hear me, I'll just take the opportunity to respond. So thanks, Councillor Rees, for your comments there, particularly around the police assaults. I appreciate that's been recognised whilst I signposted yourselves to it. Your support for us is appreciated. I do.
Yeah, carry on. I lost the network, went down.
I do.
Carry on, Alistair.
Sure, thank you. I do accept that, the Force Strait and others, I highlighted them at the start of the meeting, they are challenging for me locally to police. I get that. And that's why I draw on the resources. I thank you for your support in terms of the publicity and the political pressure to do something about it. I'll bring it back to the causes of last week, essentially around the driver attitudes and actions, but the deterring fact does educate and does influence people to drive differently, and I'll do what I can within my power to bring what improvements in terms of support and what we can do to police that area. Just in terms of the RP unit, yes, we've spoken at length about this before. That's why I deliberately am trying to be slightly agile with the resources that I've got and how I can team up with them. And it's not about creating and replicating a unit. I can't do that, but what I can do is make the best use of what I've got for the community. And finally, in terms of your ASBO, I think it's a very good point. I do believe in them. I do believe that essentially they offer a constraint, particularly for those who blight the community with their indifference and disrespect to the community. Do I think there are enough of them? Not necessarily, but the ASBOs are essentially craved by the local authority. Police provide information, as you know, to support these applications. And I think what I would endorse the power of the ASBO is that invariably with the conditions that are built in, often the breaches of the ASBO come about the breaches of those conditions. So they're a very powerful tool. I think they've still got a lot of effect. And yeah, they're worth pursuing. So thank you, Councillor.
Thank you for that, Alistair. Yes, speed limits. I'm a high mileage driver myself, and I see it across the county for a number of years. And what gets to me is the number of agencies and partners that have to be consulted before a speed limit is enforced. It takes ages. It takes ages. I'm chasing after speed limits myself. We all know the dangers are there. We all know. It's just proving to these people that we have to have a speed limit. And what surprises me as well is the number of people that object to a speed limit in a town and a village. But however, so thank you for that, Alison. Thank you, Matthew. Now we'll move to Councillor Carl Rossi.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alistair, for your report. And I would associate myself with Matthew's comments about police assaults. It's really disappointing, and you know, I hope we can see some appropriate action taken, and you know, sure, the general public give you all the support. So, just if you don't mind, I would focus on driving matters. I was really interested to note in your report, Alistair, a reference to driver engagement north. You can maybe once you get a chance to speak, you can give me some more detail on that. But I think it ties in the comments from Matthew. And, you know, when we've got speed limits in place, it then becomes about education, I would think, when there's deviations from that. So it'd be interesting to see, you know, is there an ability to use driver engagement north in workplace settings? You know, predominantly thinking about doing recite, but 2 sites, you know, with a lot of people, it could be a good starting point. It'd be interesting to get your views on that. The other issue, Alistair, I've received a lot of concerns. As you know, we've now got 20-mile-an-hour zoning in both towns, in Thurso in particular, I want to speak about. And again, you know, reports are about non-compliance, and again, I'll go back to being about education. But I mean, the rationale and evidence for pedestrian safety with 20-mile-an-hour zones is well known. So I just wonder, you know, it'd be good to get your thoughts. Do we need to do some kind of local campaign using PR in some way to just to demonstrate that you need any reasoning and rationale for 20-mile-an-hour zones? So just on your other points, really interesting, and I think we should commend licensed premises. I've only been in one, and it was last night, and I had a Coke, I would say, but I think it's really impressive how local licensees have responded to COVID regulations, and the management of that is very impressive from what I experienced last night. Caithness Cares, really encouraging to hear your comments, and indeed I welcome the Caithness strategy and the invitation you made. Look forward to participating in that. So that's all my points for now, so thank you very much.
With your indulgence, Chair, so yes, I totally agree about the driver engagement. You can see that, you know, as with a lot of activity over the last 18 months, some things have been suspended through the pandemic, and I would like myself to see that kind of reintroduced, and I'm sure in time it will, and it'll make a difference. I take on board fully what you've said. As the biggest employers in some of the areas, particularly in Vulcan, yeah, it's a great place for that piece of work to have the most tangible benefit, and particularly having, you know, heard Councillor Reese's concerns about the 4th Street in particular. I think, you know, notwithstanding that, I think there's an opportunity to broaden that in some respects. I'm regularly liaised with, is that the right phrase, by those who are behind the SSE's project from Shetland to North Head, and you know, with that there's obviously been an influx of workers into the community, so I think there's always opportunity there. Touching on the 20-mile-an-hour limits, yes, Caithness, like other communities across Scotland, have introduced 20-mile-an-hour areas. They're designed to be self-policing essentially, but for my particular position around that is around schools, notwithstanding in your own locality, and there have been, you know, going through the Community Council, getting some concerns, particularly about that area in Thurso. Licensed premise I'd endorse fully, but I think what I will say, and I think you'll respect me for saying this, we can't be complacent. We can't allow those operating licensed premises to be complacent. I think this has provided them an opportunity to reevaluate, replan, etc. Notwithstanding, they're up against a very difficult set of circumstances sometimes, and I just implore them to do what they can to keep their premises as safe as they possibly can, be it from drugs or from violence, antisocial behaviour. And I would welcome your support with over the next coming weeks with people coming into the area to help me with some of the policing projects and objectives. So thank you, Councillor Rosen.
Thank you, Alistair, for that. Now we'll go to Councillor Donnie Mackay.
Hello, Alistair. I know you do a good job, but I've been on about this the 4th Street since a few years, and there was kids in the houses there, but the school bus doesn't stop at the houses. It goes down to the crossroads, and it's a very dangerous road. Speed going out there to Dunry, if you sat at the council houses, it's horrendous. It's, to be honest, I just wonder how there's no death on that road, because it's so straight, Alistair. But Carl touched on a town. Speeding in a town with 20 mile, I don't think they know what the 20 means, because the town is very fast at weekends. Every weekend is the same. Thanks, Alistair. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I know, and again, I appreciate your comments there around force. I think really maybe going forward, I should meet with yourself, Councillor Mckay and Councillor Rees and Rossi, and discuss what we can. I mean, policing, I'll be honest with you, we can only do what we can do. I think a lot of what the three of you are talking about is design and change and so on and so forth. That's not within my capacity, but certainly is something I can support with. So I think, offer up an invitation to come meet you and go to the site, and you can talk through the issues yourself. That said, I do believe I understand some of the 20 limits. Yeah, you've all spoken about that, and I get that as well. I've made it very, very clear the challenges we face. I'm not trying to paint a very pessimistic picture. I'm trying to be as optimistic as I can. The challenges and the spaces that policing are in nowadays, it can be difficult to meet everybody's expectations. It's about how I try and manage that and, commit as opposed to promising. So yeah, I do what I can, and I think going forward into the next phase, the thing is to meet the three of you and just talk these things through intrinsically to understand the issues.
If a few policemen could go out at the weekend, Alistair, with a handgun in Thurso, and I'm sure they would get a few.
Yeah, no, I take that on board, thanks.
Thank you, Alistair, for that. Thank you. Now, Councillor Raymond Brenner.
Thanks. Morning, Alistair. Nice to see you. Just a brief point on some of the discussion that we've been having there just now. I mentioned it to you in email, and you certainly have reacted to that when I mentioned about some of the concerns in our local area here. I even stopped and met the officers when they were here with the speed gun, following the representation I made to you. I'm just wondering if it's something we've also the local community and myself have also asked for to complement that, is for the Highland Council to undertake traffic surveys so that we can highlight that to the local community councils. I know that some of the community councils have been asking for that. Sinclair Bay is one of them, and Donny and Caithness Bay is another. And maybe the information that we get there, especially if you put it in the streets that maybe the other councillors are talking about in their areas, we can actually build up a picture about the amount of speeding that's going on, especially as Councillor Donnie Mackay said there just now, if it's in if it's still happening because of the introduction of the 20 mile an hour speed limit in Thurso. Personally, I think that it has dropped in Wick because of it's taken it takes a bit of time to bed in. But maybe the council has the ability to be able to confirm that, and I'm sure it would be part of the programme that they've got to confirm that using the traffic survey, the black wires that go down. They'd be able to highlight what the actual situation is, highlight it to the community councils, and maybe have more of a planned strategy going forward in terms of that. Thanks.
Can I, Chair, just for a moment? Can I come back?
Yeah,
Yes.
come in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I would stress, and I think I've said it before, I think that data is really important. You know, I'll be honest and frank, sometimes the high visibility standing out there, while it's got that very much a reassurance, sometimes it deters, brings down that we get this false perception that actually everybody's complying with the speed limit. You know, you can look at it in so many different ways, but I think that data that you can provide is very valuable. Say, I just on you referred to Sinclair Bay. I made mention of it right at the start of the report. You know, I've got the officer that's got that community council specifically going to respond to that. So we'll see what can come from that. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Alistair. Thank you, Raymond. Matthew, your hand is still up. Do you want to come back in?
If I may, Chair,
Yeah,
briefly,
sure.
briefly.
Carl wants to come back in as well.
Responding to Inspector's invitation to meet the Ward 2 councillors. This is going to sound rude, Alistair, but you know it's not rude. But for my colleagues' benefit, Alistair was a highly trained road policing officer. He says very modestly that he thinks he understands some of the issues. I'm quite sure he understands them better than any of us. So, Alistair, your time is very precious. We're delighted to see you anytime. But my kind of take on this is, I know you understand it exactly, and we have a rough idea. My kind of thoughts, what I was trying to say, not very slightly clumsily talking about local democracy, is that we all know what the problems are, but we're unable to use what is a very effective deterrent. I think Councillor Rossi referred to in a way, you know, deterrent or education. The camera van is a deterrent. It's highly marked, it's visible. It's not just there to catch people, it is to deter people and to educate them. Oh, I'm looking at my speed, it's crept up, I should slow down. There are houses here, people live here, there are children. So yes, a meeting would be great, but from my point of view, I'm very conscious of your time. What I would love to see is the people who draw up the matrix for where the caravan can go, using some flexibility and imagination. And actually, it is a sort of democracy thing. If the police think there's a problem there, if we think there's a problem, or the community council do, something should be done about it. I just wanted to mention that the CNC, I think, have again, sort of when there's been accidents, they have helped as best they can, and it's worth recording. And also Caithness West Community Council, again, slightly light-hearted, Alistair, but you may or may not be aware there are 2 new police officers stationed in Ray 24/7. They're on duty the whole time, pointing radar guns at people. They are 2 plastic or cardboard cutouts that the community council have erected in the village, one facing east and one facing west. And I believe I see Donny nodding his head. I think they are quite effective, but it's just an example of the local community trying to do something about it. And final point, sorry, Chair, I'm trying to be brief. A visitor told me 2 weeks ago he was driving along the Lifemore Road that joins the west end of the 4th Strait. It was one of those very foggy, misty days, and this is nothing to do with the police, Alistair, you'll be glad to hear. But he said that the white lines at that junction were almost non-existent, and he nearly sort of drove onto the A836 because he didn't realise until the last minute there was actually a junction there. So that's just another small example of where the council can do something to help with this problem. And I particularly mention it because it's not so long ago there was a fatality at that very location, pretty much. Thank you again, Chair, for your forbearance.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to that, Alistair? Are you okay, or shall I carry on?
Well, there's just something maybe to you all, and I'm conscious that a number of you are very active on social media platforms. You know, Police Scotland in particular, our policing colleagues and others. And there is the Safety Camera Partnership on occasion will be active on these platforms. Please, if you're seeing something in terms of that traffic, in inverted commas, please do what you can to acknowledge it or to like it or whatever the phrase is. Please, you can see my age, I'm slightly, I need to go down to my 8-year-olds downstairs to keep me right with the phraseology these days, but but you know, it's about trying to build up that interest and that focus in Caithness as well, and you know, there's an opportunity there to influence a change or a change of approach, maybe through a different means. So I would just throw that out there for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you, Matthew. Carl, would you like to come back in?
Yeah, thanks. Just very briefly, Alistair. I'm sorry, I meant to raise it when I initially spoke to you, but we've had, as councillors, we've had debates with this topic, you know, over recent months. But one of my thoughts is, you know, we need solutions. Good to get your opinion. And I don't know whether it's something we can just do as councillors, but thinking about Forest Street in particular, where we can have provision with, you know, a visual display signs with speeding. You know, I think these things are very effective. One, if you are speeding, it's obvious to the driver, but I think it's a kind of peer pressure almost. If you're in a line of traffic and you're doing excessive speed, you know, it's going to create a means of regulating things. So, you know, I think we could do that fairly cheaply in that location, but just good to get your opinion. You know. Thank you, Alistair.
Alistair, do you want to?
It didn't come from this office, I can tell you. No, I totally endorse what you've said there, Councillor. I think, you know, the impact of a visual deterrent, be what it is, but notwithstanding, I referenced a few moments ago some of the concerns around speeding in your own area, close to where you are. It's the presence of those speed visual displays that is often bringing that to my attention, because folk are committing to what they are seeing visibly. So you're absolutely right, it's about that individual seeing what they're doing, but it's the wider perception of that particular driver. So yeah, again, I would totally support anything that can be brought in terms of a design improvement and anything to tackle and address the concerns that are absolutely, and I'm not, you know, I'm trying to say I do understand what Councillor Rees is making about particularly the residents in Force, you know, and their concerns and fears.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you, Councillor Rossi, for that. Now, Councillor Donnie Mackay, you want to come back in?
Well, I'm coming back in, but Matthew said most of it, because when I was off a run to going into Sutherland, I couldn't mind where a policemen were. But Matthew's right, it was Ray. My wife tells me that, and it certainly had impact because the cars in front of me were braking. So I knew there was something. But I think, I don't know, is it the police would put that there or what, but it certainly had an impact on the drivers in front of me. But some of our estates in Thurso, Alistair, is like Ormley Estate, the new houses at the Bar Hospital. It's a circle, and they race round that circle most weekends. Now, there's young kids in that houses, at bungalows, and I think there was a policeman that used to stay in that. He went to Allness. Can't remember his name offhand, but he stayed there. When he was there was no problem. But when he moved out, the racing started, and the roads department will put in what you call it, sleeping policeman, and which I said is all money. But how we police it, I don't know. But if you're ever in Thurso, I'd like you to come and have a look at some of our estates. Some of our estates are straight, and it makes speed. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mackay. Alistair, do you want to wind up there, or are you okay?
Yeah, I'll just, if that's in order, I'll wind up here. But I think you just have to look at the visual deterrent at Wotton to see what that creates for anybody approaching from the east to the west. I think, Councillor Mackay, your point there leads me just to kind of sum up. What I am seeing in terms of trend is that, some of you will probably come back at me at this, and please don't, but it's not about a re-emergence. I know they continue to be, but it's actually what is going on around, not to stigmatise anybody, but I'll say boy racer, but those who have got an interest, the car fraternity, an interest in, but some of the driving standards is now reaching that stage, and only in Wick. I'm very conscious that some of the residents in Wick have been particularly frustrated about the irresponsible and arguably downright dangerous attitudes displayed by young drivers. You know, there has got to be an education that's got to come from the parental responsibility and from the introduction to driving, and realizing that driving a car and having a license is a privilege, very much a privilege that's got to be taken seriously. And I pick up on your points, Councillor, but I think I would like to just leave by saying that I'm seeing a re-emergence, but it's, when I say re-emergence, about what they're willing to do, and it's something that over time we'll try and tackle. But I can't tackle myself. I can't with myself. Like, again, locally, whether it's out there on a social media platform or whether it's it's reporting to us this is unacceptable. But more than that, it's reporting who the individual is, what the registration is, so that we can take action and put them to necessarily reports to fiscal, try and curb it, as well as the social unacceptability of it all. So, Chair, I'm very conscious I've taken up a lot of your meeting time. I hope I have.
Before you go, Alistair, we had that in Riverside in Thurso, and once the sleeping policeman went in, it's finished.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Mackay. I think designing in into the infrastructure has a massive benefit, and whilst some people will qualify it that it's a pest, there's a real reason for it there. And I think what you're all saying to me in many respects, and I'm agreeing with you, I think you can see that, is that these things are unacceptable. Actions of some are unacceptable. There is a risk of life ultimately, and absolutely right. Any deterrent, improvement to design, any proactivity, be it policing, be it visual displays, anything is positive for me.
Thank you, also. Thank you for that. Thank you, members, for your contribution. Absolutely wonderful discussion. I must say something. I must say this because I'm a high mileage driver myself, and I see a lot of speeding. Speeding's been of the essence here this morning, but I'm very much involved with 3 speeding clubs in the county here. I think I told you that before. I'm involved with the Caithness Autocross Club, the Bangor Derbies, and the Caithness Sprint Clubs. And let's be honest, all it's in their head, and they're really fantastic drivers, is speed, speed, speed on the day. But these are very well run events, very well run. And they do educate the drivers out there on the field or wherever they go how to handle a car. We are a speed orientated county. Believe you me, but I hope that these drivers will learn the lesson and slow down. That's from me. But I also thank you very much for your comprehensive report. It's always a pleasure for you to join us. So members, you are invited to note the progress against the objectives set within the Highland Local Policing Plan 2020-2023, Year 1, attached as Annex A to this report for the period covering the 1st of April 2020 to March 2021. Members agreed?
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well done. Thank you, Alistair. Let's move on now, members, to item 6, the place-based investment fund. And we've got Alison Clark, got a lovely report here, a separate page for you. More pages. And Alison Clark, would you like to speak to this report and just tell us how we're doing and how the paper looks?
Thank you, Chair. And it's Alex's report, so I will attempt to do it justice in terms of a brief introduction. So the report in front of you proposes allocations for spend from your place-based investment funds. Members, you'll recall that the Council's Health and Prosperity Strategy that was agreed in March allocated £100,000 per ward, and that was to address local priorities in around the 4 harms of COVID. Decisions on spend against that 100,000 for each ward will be made at the area committee. So there have been a number of different discussions locally and with your communities as well, and the proposals in the report reflect the priorities that have been identified so far. So members, if I may, just in terms of going through the different proposals that are set out. So section 5 of the report sets out the first range of allocations in relation to play parks, play areas. That's proposing £40,000 from each Ward 2 and Ward 3 investment funds, and that's for the refurbishment, repairs or improvements of play areas within those wards. I think members, you had briefings from the amenities team, and there have been discussions locally regarding the investment that's required in play areas, and also about whether play spaces and open space could be considered in a different way. Open space for play rather than necessarily just about play equipment. As the report notes, there have been a number of different community-based groups that have been established to support the refurbishment of play parks and play areas and or to provide new equipment. And so the proposals in terms of the investment fund relate to supporting those community-led efforts to improve play areas within the county. So it is proposed in terms of taking this forward that it would be a grant scheme developed to allow community groups to bid into, seeking applications by the end of November this year, and applications would be made through the normal ward discretionary grants process. In terms of the management of those funds, if there were any awards to be made over 10,000, then that would come back to committee for further decision making. So in terms of the second allocation proposed for Ward 2, that relates to improvements for Sir George's Park and Ormley Park in Thurso. In relation to Sir George's Park, the proposals relate to infrastructure improvements, and for Ormley relating to pitch improvements. Now it's proposed to allocate £60,000 from the Ward 2 investment fund towards this. The work for Sir George's Park would be managed by the Council's Infrastructure and Environment Project team, and the work on Ormley Park through Highland. So the second proposed allocation, which is set out in section 7 for Ward 3, relates to the improvements for rural bus shelters. That's followed discussions with a number of different community councils and community groups across the county in terms of the replacement of bus shelters, with a real intention to try and improve use of public transport within those communities. So it's proposed to allocate 35,000 from the ward's place-based investment fund towards this. This project would be taken forward with Infrastructure and Environment Service and developed in consultation with local members. The final section of the report in section 8 relates to the remaining allocation for Ward 3. 25,000 remains unallocated. The intention, as set out in section 8, is to use this to support the development of the Wick Town Centre project. There is further work required on that over the next few weeks, and further discussions along with community and local members on how best this funding could be allocated to support the Wick Town Centre project. And a report on that will come back to the next meeting of this committee. So members, the proposals that I've just outlined are in the recommendations of section 2 in the report, and I'll do my best to answer any questions. Thanks very much, members.
Thank you very much for that, Alison. Absolutely there. Councillor Raymond Brimner.
Yep, delighted to see this coming forward. I have to say that Alison, the 25,000 that's stated in the report, as I understand it, there is already quite some clarification on what that is actually going to be used for, but it doesn't quite come across in the report. That's not a criticism of the report, but I just think we need to put that in the public domain. There are initiatives in the town, and these have been discussed locally at the local community council as well, in terms of complementing other works that are going on in the town. That is the painting of some of the infrastructure in the town, the lighting, the lampposts, the bollars, the barriers, because in certain areas of the town it looks tired, and my colleague Willie, and also the former councillor Nicola Sinclair We went walking around the town to take pictures and images of these. They're small things, but they can make a big impact. The likes of the painting of railings, and things that the council probably wouldn't take. Wouldn't do more than one colour on lampposts, and to coordinate it as a kind of project. That's probably what that money is going to be targeted at. On the one about the bus shelters, that might seem trivial. It's not. As far as I'm concerned, we've seen requests coming in from many communities over a number of years now, and the council has said it has no budget for that. Firstly, the council needs to find a budget for that. It should not have to come from place-based investment by councillors allocating monies for that. We need to challenge council and say bus shelters and supporting the transport infrastructure in this county and through the Highlands has to be allocated for through the normal budget for council. It cannot be relied on for opportunities of funding like this to come along, where members have to make a decision as to whether they use that funding or not. So now that I've made that point in terms of council making sure that there is a budget there and that it is suffice as well. The monies that we've allocated for the place-based investment, that is to do with bus shelters, which have been highlighted and discussed at the monthly roads meetings. There is a list. It is not exhaustive, but at this point in time, because of the money, it is exhausted. But I have to say, we need to have a discussion maybe at the ward business meeting, because I've noted that 2 or 3 of those bus shelters are actually in Ward 2, even though there's a representation at the likes of Donny and Caithness Community Council, where residents of Barrack have mentioned about their bus shelter being in the wrong place, needing to be relocated. It's a working East Caithness councillor that attends that, so that's why these kind of things can get a little bit crisscrossed. But the main aim is to now do the works that these communities have been looking for to be done for a number of months. And the final one is the play parks. Whilst we've got that play parks money for both wards allocated there, which will be welcome, very, very welcome, I would still say that is not that is something that the communities can bid into at the moment, but it's not the be all and end all of how we're going to be able to sort out our play parks, either Caithness or Highland wide. We need to have a proper play park strategy in council. We know that it's not a statutory function of council, but when these play parks are put in place, we need to be. It is something that the council has to maintain and has to look at and look after in support of our communities. So we need a strategy in place, and that's something I'd like to raise at this meeting, so that it's brought to the attention of full council. We need to understand what the Scottish Government's commitment is to this. They have mentioned, I think the figure is 60 million. We need to know what the breakdown of that is, and sooner rather than later. That will be very welcome by council. It will also empower council to be able to put in a proper play park strategy, and it needs to be robust enough to be able to meet the needs of the needs and expectations of our community. So I think you can tell that through all of that, we're pretty passionate about some of the stuff that we're getting the ability to be able to spend this place-based investment money on. We need to get it spent as quickly as possible, and we need to be able to resource the spending of that as quickly as possible, because we know that our services in council are already under pressure. But this is welcome money. And I'm absolutely looking forward to seeing the benefit of this money once it gets spent within our communities. Thanks for the report, Alison.
Thanks, Councillor Bremner. Do you want to come back, Alison? Are you okay? Shall I?
I'll maybe come back at the end if there's in terms of all the questions.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Thank you, Councillor Bremner, for that. Councillor Matthew Rees. I think you're muted, Matthew. Are you muted?
Sorry,
I think
yes.
you are.
Previous convictions for that, not always a bad thing. I was saying it's pretty much full agreement with Councillor Bremner there, and the kind of questions I had for Alison were, and they may not come as a surprise, but I've always been taken aback when I started to look into play parks. The cost of maintenance of some of the play equipment is horrifying, to be quite frank. And I've mentioned this before, but I know in one or two areas of the council, particularly Harbour, they are installing equipment that is more kind of less risk averse equipment for the kids to sort of scramble around on. And it apparently, according to Councillor Thompson in particular down there, it's been a huge success. But with my hard-headed budget hat on, the thing that interests me is that it's much cheaper to maintain. And I agree with what Raymond said about strategy, and maybe that strategy should include quite a strong focus on long-term implications financially of the type of equipment we put in. That's one point. And trying to be positive, really, the money we're putting to the football parks, this is undiluted good news. Difficult decision to make because there are so many other things that we would like to fund, but and I'm hoping Carl's got his hand up. Carl, I think, knows more about this than I do, but for the damage in particular, 150 years, this is a really good thing that's happening. And for the Ormley pitch. And one other question for Alison, I think I know the answer, but I've been incredibly frustrated, even and depressed this last few days, trying to get brown signs replaced in places like Dunnet and Ray, and finding how difficult it is to get any money for something so basic. And one of the signs is in such bad condition that in email correspondence, people in the community are actually suggesting the signs just be taken down because it's such a bad advertisement for their village. But it's just the hoops trying to jump through to actually get the brown signs replaced right on the North Coast 500, height of the tourist season, hundreds of tourists driving past, seeing signs that are literally broken and corroded. I don't know, I mean, our money is taken up. We're also acutely aware in Ward 2 of the more rural villages. They've got their play parks too, but it's just really a question about, in general, how widely can we spend this money on if it should reappear in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Matthew. Yes, moving on now to Councillor Carl Rossi.
Thank you, Willie, and I would wholeheartedly agree with Raymond's summary. I think he was absolutely spot on, and there's no need for me to labour the points I make. I think just touching on play parks, I'm mindful of we had the fact that we had a really excellent presentation by our amenities manager on play parks, or existing ones recently, and it really was valuable in demonstrating the issues that we have with lack of historical investment, and for the low revenue budgets for maintenance. So look, we are where we are, but I think there's an opportunity, and there's possibly a difference here now between Ward 2 and Ward 3. It's a fact of life that on Ward 3 there's slightly more access to community benefits. Please don't, Raymond, panic. I'm not suggesting that all your community benefits goes into play parks, but within the context of the paper, it alludes to the fact that there are community groups willing and wanting to improve facilities, and that's fantastic. But I think we've got a real opportunity here to just recognise what was in the report, and there were some fantastic opportunities that were alluded to that, and how we can maybe rationalise things and use existing public spaces for different things, and then think about the type of modern equipment that Matthew touched on there. So it's absolutely vital that we find out exactly what local communities want. If we can identify, how we can create the ideal playground, there's no doubt that people will use these facilities. So I think there's something to think about there. It's how we consult. And I think we've got a lot of thought into what's the most effective means of doing that. So, but thanks for the report in that section. Just going on to the investment that we've agreed in Ward 2 for sports pitches, I think is absolutely fantastic. It's been really pleasing to see the level of activity on these pitches over the summer. With kids being coached. I think Ross County, our local Premier League club, they provided coaching facilities, and then there were some community-led initiatives. So it's absolutely fantastic to see kids using the facilities, and we all know what the benefits are. What I would like to do is, we touched on it recently as local members. I think we've got to focus on 365 days of the year, giving kids access. We know we've got long, dark winters, and indeed within the report from our amenities manager, he highlighted the cost of all-weather surface pitches. Now we could, there's a possibility to provide small, I'm going to say 5-a-side football areas, but we could provide small all-weather surface areas that, all ages could use during the winter months. So I think we should put some effort into looking at that and just see how we can get some match funding and make arrangements for that as soon as possible. But very much welcome the report and look forward to seeing the improvements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rossi, for that. Yeah, Alison, we'll just keep on moving if you don't mind. Councillor Bremner would like to come back in, and then Councillor Donny Mackay.
Yes, Councillor Mackay, Chair, Provost, Commissioner, all the titles that you're getting today. Just to let you know that at the end of this discussion and before members agree to the recommendations, I'll be bringing a motion forward.
Thank you for that. Now we have one more to go, Alison, and this is a very famous footballer of the 60s on the Dummies. He was a prolific footballer in Thurso. He's with us today, and I often wonder what he thought of the surface in the 60s. Here he is, Councillor Donnie Mackay.
Thanks, Chair. My legs are still sore, Willie. I played on the Dummies for years, so I know all about the Dummies. But the only thing is, the council's good at maybe putting things in like the all-weather park up at Dover, but they do no maintenance. This is a problem. It's no sense putting a thing in if there's no going to be maintained. It's like a swing park. It's got to be maintained. A Rotary Club, but a play park over at the boating pond, and it's never been maintained. We've got to get the maintenance of all these things. If we're going to do it, get the maintenance alongside it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Donny. Okay, Alison, do you want to come in, and then Raymond will come back with this motion.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and thank you, members. Thanks for all your comments and your queries. And just going back in terms of the different questions, and I mean, quite a lot of the were comments and points that were being raised. Councillor Bremner, apologies if the sort of discussions that you've had around the town centre aren't reflected in that report so far. We'll take that forward. We'll have the discussions at the next ward business meeting, refine that, and we'll ensure that comes back to the next committee in that sense. Quite a number of comments around the play parks and play areas, and yes, members, you'll know the challenges that have been identified and shared with you by the amenities manager in terms of ongoing maintenance and where that budget is. So I think there's a couple of things in here in terms of the approach going forwards, and I know that you've already had discussions with your communities. I think the point about that engagement with communities about what's most important, what do they want in terms of their play areas going forwards, and this funding can certainly support that, is really significant. The reference, I think, Councillor Rees, you spoke about the sustainable play areas, and I think that that's a really interesting area to develop and have those conversations with communities about. It is as part of your grant fund streams, and we can pick this up at the ward business meeting, need to think about the criteria that we're wanting groups to come forward with. That could be one of the options that you want groups to consider about. That sustainability element and the maintenance element is going to be really significant in terms of that. So we could look at that in terms of how we go forwards. Councillor Bremner, you made the point more generally about in terms of resourcing the spend and the being able to ensure that the funds that you've identified are taken forward and progressed, and that's why we've been quite significant, quite important in the report to note, and there've been the discussions with the services involved to ensure that they have the capacity to be able to take forward those pieces of work, because it's really important to get those progressed. So those discussions have taken place. And in terms of Councillor Rees, your point about how widely the funds can be spent, the fund is flexible. It's to address the 4 harms of COVID have been identified in terms of the priority areas you've noted in terms of this report. It's been a flexible fund. If there was anything, and it's a 1-year fund, this one at the currently, if there was anything in the future, it would depend on what the criteria and the parameters would be around about that. But certainly in terms of the flexibility of the fund at the moment, it enables you to respond to those local priorities, which you've clearly done. So I think members, hopefully I've picked up the range of different points there. More generally, in terms of just going back to the play areas and sustainability, I think that's one of the really crucial elements in terms of any bids that are coming forward from communities, is thinking about the ongoing maintenance of any of that equipment. So I think we'd certainly welcome, and I'm sure the amenities manager would as well, the opportunity to discuss with you at the next ward business meeting in terms of defining the criteria for the grant stream before that goes out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Alison, for that. Matthew, would you like to come back in?
Just very briefly, Chair. Thank you, Alison. You answered all those questions very rapidly and succinctly and efficiently, as always. I think the point I was trying to make was whether or not the COVID money comes again. I mean, the interpretation of what we've been able to use it for has been the subject of quite a lot of discussion. I've always favoured, and I think most of my colleagues are very flexible, at using our imagination as to what it can be used for. I was making the point not very effectively. I just think kind of things like the brown tourism signs that are on the A9 and the A99 and the North Coast 500 route. I just think fundamentally I sense there's something wrong when, for example, the community council at Ray are having to sort of see whether or not they can somehow get their local signs replaced. And I've actually just seen an email this morning saying that even we're bound by the Scotland Excel contract for this, and even to get a quote, some of the companies that we use actually now charge just to get a quote. The community council does not have, a lot of money for this. Our roads colleagues tell me the sign might be up to about £5,000. And I think maybe Councillor Bremner was referring to this when he was talking about, paint and just tidying up things. This is one of the sort of relatively small scale things that goes a long way. You get a lot of value for a small amount of money, in my opinion. That's the point I was trying to make. So if the money comes in the future, I hope we're allowed to spend it as we're given free rein on how we spend it. That's the bottom line. Thank you again.
Thank you, Councillor Rees, for that. Okay, Raymond, did you want to come in with a motion before we sum up?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Chair. It reflects, the motion reflects on a lot of the discussion that we've had there just now. We've highlighted the fact, a number of factors here. The first thing is that this is one-off funding that has been allocated. It is welcome funding, but it's not necessarily sustainable. We can't be relying on one-off bits of funding coming along. We don't know when that's going to be. We don't know when the next, and we don't even know if the 80,000 that's been allocated by both boards is going to be anything like sufficient for what we for what our actual demand and need is in the county at the moment. Reflective of what Councillor Rees said about the fact that you know, we do need to look at other ways of sustaining our community play parks. Our communities are also mindful of that, and they're coming up with initiatives as well. We need to have some sort of strategy that supports all of that, because it's only in that, in support of all of that, and understanding what the funding is that's going to be coming from the Scottish Government, that we can have a sustainable strategy going forward, and one that can show continued investment. So my motion to the Caithness Committee, which I'm sure will end up as a starred item to Council, is that Caithness Committee welcomes the place-based investment funds, which have allowed local members to allocate one-off funding that will support long-awaited investment in our local play parks. Whilst this is very welcome, it does not satisfy the long-term demand for a sustainable strategy and investment in our play parks in the Highland Council area. Therefore, Caithness members request that Highland Council creates and implements a Highland Council-wide playground or play park strategy that considers the needs and expectations of our communities and supports the active play, well-being and social activity of our children and their families. I'll put that in the chat. I believe that Councillor Rossi will second that, and I'll put that to the committee for their support. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Raymond. Yeah, Carl, are you seconding the motion?
I am indeed, Willie. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's no amendments to the motion, is there? Alison, is this quite competent, the motion? I'm sure it is.
Yes, I mean, as Councillor Bremner has already highlighted, that would go as a starred item too.
Starred item, okay. Right, thank you very much for that, Raymond. And thank you, Carl, for seconding that. Alison, thank you so much for speaking to this report with us today. Members, overall, I think you've done very well with decisions you'll be making on this funds across the county. You spent a lot of time here, I can see, and I know on your deliberations, so well done indeed. So members, the committee are invited to consider and agree the proposed allocations of the place-based investment fund as follows in the paper in front of you for Ward 2 and 3. You agreed?
Great.
Well done. Well done. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let's move on to item number 7, the Wick Associated School Group Overview. And have we got Roger talking to this one, Roger, or is it Christine Gordon, or have we got Nicky Grant, or have we got all three in this wonderful presence of this beautiful committee here today?
Willie, sorry to interrupt you. Is it possible just to have a short 5-minute break? Is that possible?
Sure. Well, yes, it is. Nicky, are you okay with that? We're going to hold on, Roger and Christine. Okay, everybody? Yeah. We'll have a quick 5-minute comfort break. Exactly. Okay.
And sorry,
Chair, and say,
Chair, could I just ask?
Speak with Christine if it's no problem? Is it all right, yeah. Christine?
Yes, sir. Yes, sorry. You can speak to me.
I don't know, is it you or Roger? I'm no sure, you see. I'll tell you a problem we've got. It's at Scrapster.
Right, we'll have a comfort break while you can talk. You talk amongst yourselves.
Right.
We'll have a comfort break for 10 minutes. Make it to agenda item number 7, the Wick Associated School Group Overview. And we've got it with us, Roger Bamfield from the Children's Services, we've got Christine Gordon from Education, and we've got our ECO as well present, Nicky Grant. So who wants to take the lead on this report? Roger?
Christine's going to take the lead. Christine? We'll start.
Okay, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've been tasked with this, so I hope I'll do it justice. Unfortunately, Alison, who would normally lead on this, is not with us today. She's on annual leave. So I'll give you as much information as I can, and hopefully, if I've missed something, my colleagues will be able to come in and add to it. So you've all had the opportunity to read the paper that was sent in advance of committee. and I'll just talk through it briefly just now. The first item shows the dates of inspections that have happened within schools. Due to the pandemic, there have been no recent inspections, and as yet we're not aware of when Education Scotland will be beginning to engage with schools. But as a council, we continue to work with schools throughout the pandemic, and continuing on with restrictions easing, we'll have more in-school engagement now being possible. When we go through to the Care Inspectorate inspections, you'll see that there are a number there that have been done. You'll see too that some areas have been not assessed and some have been assessed. The reason for this with the inspections is that there are two types of inspections that they do, a shorter and a longer one, with some focusing on 2 areas and some focusing on 4. So it's not that schools don't cover all the areas, that's part and parcel for their roles, but it's just that those are the 2 focuses or 4 focuses when the inspection actually takes place. Again, Care Inspectorate are beginning to work with schools and visit them again now, so we will most likely have updates on those over the coming months. I listened to the talk around safety and road safety, and this links in with our school travel plans, and you'll see there that a number of our schools, or the majority of our schools, have travel plans in place, and there are 2 that don't, and this is something that we can look at in more detail to see how this could support what you were talking about earlier as well. Staffing is listed there, the staffing that we have in the schools at the moment, and you'll see that the staffing is as per our Highland staffing model. This is under review at present, and there will be a new Highland staffing model coming out in due course. The school budgets are listed there. You will see what the budget is, the cost, what the cost is per pupil within each school, but also the carry forward, which is clearly stated there in brackets. For our pupil information, looking at the pupil destinations for the 16 plus, you'll see that Wick High School's latest figures this year, the 2019-20 report is slightly higher than the 2018-19 for positive destinations, which is good to read, and that the figures for Wick High School are above Highland and above Scotland. For destinations going into higher and further education, this has increased over time in the area, and there has been unfortunately a decrease in employment. Now, there is always a story behind these figures. I don't have the detail I would like to share with you because the schools have been on holiday, so I've not had an opportunity to speak to the head teacher at Wick High School. So I'm sorry I can't give that detail, but with the increase over time with the further and higher education, what we've noticed in Caithness is that although the higher education tend to be lower, there is what we find is that they tend to go on to further education and then in the future go on to higher education, this being because there is quite a distance to go and it's quite a change for them to go into higher education immediately, so they'll take the opportunity to increase their qualifications in a more local environment and then in the future move on to higher education. There also, we may see this change in the future because of further opportunities that are now developing through the development of online learning, etc., and further opportunities being available there. For the unemployment, unemployment not seeking, this is higher than normal. And normally, again, too, I would speak to Seb, or Alison would speak to Seb, and we would get the stories behind why this may be the case. Unfortunately, I can't give any more information on that at the moment. For attendance, attendance is good in all our primary schools, and it's above Highland and Scotland data. For exclusions, NOS is showing 9 out of 1,000, which is slightly above Scotland but higher than Highland, and Newton Park is showing 5.8, and that's on more or less on par with Highland. Wick High School is below Highland and Scotland, and again, I do apologise, but we would have reasons behind this as to why, but unfortunately I don't. However, what I can share with you, and Roger may want to come in and give a bit more information on this, but in the north we've had a focus on exclusions, and since the return to school, Roger and Alison have had a debrief with the schools after each exclusion, and they have a checklist that they go through to see if the policy has been followed, and give support through discussing with the school what the alternatives and strategies may be that could be put in place so that to avoid exclusions in the future, and support the young person as best possibly can. Hope is that this focus will improve the policy and reduce the exclusions that we have in the north. From an ASN point of view, I think the best thing now I can pass to Roger, who will give you some more detail on that.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with what I think is very good news. Just at the end of June, we appointed a permanent teacher to the ASN team whose deployment is going to be scope at Miller. It's a local person, so I hope moving back. So one aspect is she's going to stay, I think, and she was outstanding in her interview, and her references are outstanding. She's been into Miller over the holiday, worked with Jackie Budge, so that's some really good news. Also in June, on staffing, the acting manager at Airport House, Lynn Maclean, put in her resignation. She's been extremely good in the job for this off-site provision, working with young people who find it hard to attend school, sometimes because of mental health issues, sometimes because of social and emotional difficulties. The good aspect of that is she's becoming a trainee social worker in Caithness. I've asked the head teachers of Wick and Thurso High Schools if Gail and I can meet with them, Gail, the ASN officer, to discuss Airport House, future developments that they would like to see in the way that it works with their schools before looking to put an authority to recruit for a new manager there. And at Mount Pleasant Enhanced Provision, Heather Carberry, the teacher there, is retiring in December. This is known, shall we say, and this week I had somebody get in touch with me because they would be interested in the job, which I think caught me off guard a wee bit, but a key bit is having somebody who wants to work there rather than deploying a member of the team who goes a bit reluctantly. So that's been some good news on staffing, but we've got changes. Regarding the allocation of ASN staff to schools, you'll be aware that that process has been postponed. The schedule is that in late August, early September, we'll be having meetings with the head teachers in each AST, and myself and Gail will come with a suggestion to help start the ball rolling about the allocation, and the head teachers will then discuss it and determine final allocation. Gail and I are meeting tomorrow. We're still working on figures because over the summer we've had staff leaving. We've had new pupils coming into the area with significant needs, and so it's still a work in progress. And I would just say one issue at Wick High School has been, over the last year, they have had a very significant number of pupils with higher levels of additional needs coming into the area during the session. And we have the budget, and that is a real challenge because that is the staffing. So the area leadership team, we're going to be meeting with them early in the new session to have a discussion around this and how do we address this, because it is likely to continue. Regarding exclusions, as Christine said, this has been a priority for us as a leadership team. Alison and I are meeting with the head teachers in each case when there is an exclusion. Head teachers are, if there are additional needs, are to contact myself or Christine to discuss an exclusion before it takes place. But we're having that reflective review with the head teachers. Where we've done that, that's been appreciated by the head teachers. It's been a very positive discussion and helping to move things forward. Another thing I'll just share, Christine talked about attendance, and you'll be aware that the COVID situation has increased the difficulty for some people, some young people attending our schools. A parent contacted Gail and myself yesterday because the school's tried to help, but she's thinking her daughter will find it really difficult returning to high school and probably she won't be able to get her in. One thing she said that had been helpful to her was she happened to be talking to somebody else and their child has similar difficulties. And she said how useful that was. So following that, what I'm thinking of doing is contacting the head teachers at the high schools, because that's where the greatest difficulty often is here, and working through them to contact parents whose children have a high level of non-attendance or have stopped attending, to meet for coffee and see if we can get a self-help group going. So helping to facilitate that, but it would be, we'd then be stepping back. It's up to the parents to do it, but just trying to support them because there are huge pressures on them. It makes it very difficult. Just they feel guilty, that's what this parent talked about, and it's also impacting on her relationship with her daughter. So, we're just trying to support and be creative. So that's all I want to say. Open to questions.
Well done, Roger. Thank you, Christine. Yes, members, have you any questions or comments to make? Yes, Raymond, would you like to come in? Councillor Raymond Brimler.
Yes, I certainly would, and I think Nicky knows some of the concerns I'm going to be bringing to the table today, and this is a repeat of concerns previously. the report, the format of this report is not fit for purpose. It's a table filling exercise. I don't want this to reflect as a criticism on the actual officers. This per se, this is a criticism on how this report reports. We see this year after year. We have commented on this before. This report is it's out of date. It gives us the figures and it gives us the kind of summary, but it doesn't give us the up to date the up to date where we are, even in a narrative form that we require. Nikki, I've mentioned that to you, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to see some sort of material change in the reporting of these figures. For those of us who've been watching the trends, we see swings and roundabouts in the schools in the Wiki ESG quite frequently. Where there, let's talk about the destination table there. The one thing that struck me was going. I haven't got it in front of me because I'm too busy looking at Teams here. Just give me a second till I get this report in front of me, because the one thing that struck me, as was being referred to, was the unemployed not seeking going from 2.29. We saw that fall, welcomed, to 1.44. Now, it might not seem a high percent, it's only gone from 1.44 to 4.31. That's not good. Now, why? Given the fact that that is of concern to me, I would have thought that there would have at least been some sort of narrative behind that, and even though we're talking about COVID and the availability of officers and what have you, we know that members are going to query that. When you're looking at the table, when you're looking at the table, you go higher education is at 24.4.62 and then increased to 33.62. Further education similarly has gone from 24.43 up to 36.21. These are heading in an upward direction, while those who were going into direct employment has fallen from 42.75 to 18.97, quite drastically. What I would not like to see, and I'm sure neither would our communities, and we would be looking to make sure that we are reactive, is where that employment continues to fall and that higher education and further education doesn't increase any higher than it is, and the unemployed not seeking and the unemployed seeking start to trend adversely. And I would like to know at this point in time if we have recognised that and what we're actually doing about it. Please, I'm not trying to overstate this, but let's not have it that in a year's time, because a year's time will not be reflective of a year's time will be reflective of now and not what it will be then, because of the way that this report's written. It carries outdated information, but it gives us a good update, but it tends to be a little bit out of date. It's the same with other information that's in this report, and I've reflected that concern before previously. So, Nikki, maybe you might want to comment on that, but certainly this needs to change, and the sooner the better.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to come in there, Councillor Bremner, and I completely agree with you in terms of the data that you have in front of you. And I think that's the reason why Alison has been working with yourselves around about how we do attainment meetings in the future. So she has got a proposed plan, a draft plan in place, which I think will start in November with our Thurso schools and ESGs and taking our members out. So that'll be the first part in terms of the planning. Secondly, I'm hoping that as of the week of the 1st of September, we'll have interviews for our 2 heads of service posts. So one for primary ALC and one for secondary. And those 2 recruits will be working with our area managers on a new format for our members. Because you're right, there's no point in me coming to the table to talk about old data. We need it live, we need to be talking about things, and we need to be able to put interventions in place. It's not too late. Just on the data there just now in terms of positive destinations, I wanted to reassure you in terms of the Education and Learning Directorate and also schools in terms of what we have put in place since last year. So in each of our secondary schools we have pathway planning meetings, and the pathway planning meetings start very early on in the broad general education. And what that does is it identifies maybe pathways, career pathways through the career education standards for our young people to talk with their guidance teachers around, so that when they come to third year in terms of their subject choices, then they're already aware of where their strengths are, maybe where their areas of improvement are, and how we can support them in terms of that next step. So that's just one thing that we've introduced. We've also been working really closely with the Chamber of Commerce, and again in each of our 29 secondary schools we have a DYW coordinator, and the DYW coordinator, that person has been part of your community, which is the first time we've ever had that, which I think is a really great initiative, because what it does is the DYW coordinator is probably aware of some of the local businesses, you know, maybe aware of some of the local opportunities, and can then have that conversation with the young person and tie that into the business and socioeconomic opportunities of the community. So that's a real strength for us. And I'm sure by this time next year, you know, once the DYW coordinators have been embedded, we'll see that that positive destination figure goes up. The last thing that I'd like to just mention, and it goes back to the March Council paper, which was the Economic Prosperity paper. And if you remember, within that paper, the Education Directorate had committed to a few of the key targets in order to try and improve employability, particularly for our most vulnerable young people. And I'm pleased to say that last month we had employed an employability coordinator to work with all of our schools, but in particular our most vulnerable young people who are at risk of a positive destination. And that person has started career mentoring with those young people, and they'll be looking to members for support in terms of that. So that was just to give you an overview in terms of the positive destinations.
Thank you very much for that, Nikki. Raymond, do you want to come back on that? Are you quite happy? Shall we move on?
Yes, I would like to come back on that, Willie, but very briefly, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. Yeah, you go.
Thanks, Nikki, for addressing my concerns. I did actually think that they would be in hand, given the restructuring process or the redesign of council at the moment. But it's important that members of the public know that it is in hand, and that's why it was important for us to raise it. Again, I'd emphasise, currently that table is just a form-filling exercise. It doesn't actually allow for officers to give members the up-to-date narrative, and that's and moving forward, I'd like to see the heads of service, their appointments, concentrate on that. That's what members and what members of the public are looking for. So thanks very much. That is reassuring. Let's see it happen now. Thanks very much.
Okay, Nikki, I'll take you back in before we have Councillor Rees.
Thank you, Chair. And just going on the positive SQA results that our children and young people have had across the Highlands, I'll give you some up-to-date figures just now, just in terms of the Wick and Thurso schools. So in terms of A to D passes for all subjects and across National 5, Higher and Advanced Higher, the Wick High School have gone up by 1.5% to 93.8%, and Thurso have gone up by 3.7% to 96.1%. So that's a fantastic achievement for the young people across, you know, our ASG and across the council. So well done.
Thank you, Nikki. Yes, for that. Matthew, Councillor Rees, would you like to come in?
Yeah, you've just cheered me up, Nikki, with those figures you've just fired out at us. That's the value of up-to-date things. That's really interesting. Chair, there's been a slightly worrying trend over the last year. More and more, I find I'm agreeing with what Councillor Bremner says. And yes, and it's the case again now. These reports, I just really want to add, being serious, what we should be looking for, and this may not be a surprise to you, we need sort of value for money, and anything, I repeat, anything that reduces workload and therefore stress on our officers is to be welcome. We don't need stuff that we either should know already or is actually kind of in the past. And I know there's a bit of a judgment call, and you could easily get members complaining, oh, why didn't you tell us about this, that, or the other? But I would rather err on the side of, you know, just reducing as far as we possibly can the bureaucracy upon all of you, really. I particularly suppose single out the teachers, for this, just so, because that makes them more effective and it reduces stress levels. And as a total aside, I think I noticed that the papers today, there's 259 pages, I think, of papers for this committee, albeit a sizable chunk of them are about one item, and there's actually some very interesting stuff in there. It's just something about paperwork and workload and making it manageable, and therefore we're less likely to miss something, that's actually really, really important. And, this is a public meeting, and there's always the question of anonymity. And I understand the problem, Nikki, you're referring to. If we go into too much detail, it might be possible for a child or a parent to be identified, which it would be utterly inappropriate, obviously. I just really want to sort of support what you were saying, Raymond, and as an aside, but an important one. It's not my ward, so excuse me, Ward 3 members, for sort of asking, but I don't think you'll mind. I just wondered if there's any progress that can be made available to us and the public, therefore, on the sale, the hoped, getting rid of the old Wick High School site, because putting my old police hat on, I'm sort of worried about the vulnerability of that large complex of buildings. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew, for that. Okay, I'll move on to Councillor Donnie Mackay now. Donnie, are you got the old mute on again?
My hearing might not be so good, Roger, but I think you said you're losing a teacher at Mount Pleasant, and you have one to go in, please. Is that right?
I have somebody who's expressed interest in it.
Thank you very much.
Obviously, it would need to be advertised, and she'd need to be the best candidate. It's going to be open, but it's really good that somebody's interested in it, but there may well be others.
I'm delighted. That's good news. Thank you. Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Now, Councillor Carl Rossi.
Yeah, thanks. Well, just very briefly, I think it's right to acknowledge the update that Nicky gave us on the results. It's been an incredibly difficult period for kids, teachers, staff, and everyone. So, it really is fantastic news. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carl, for that. Yes, it's very interesting indeed. And as it's termed, the challenge was in a COVID-disrupted academic year. Outstanding achievements. Yes, absolutely unbelievable there. Well done to everybody. We all have our education. We all have the education that our children get in the county. So, yeah, thank you very much. Any questions, any further questions, members? Any? Okay,
Chair,
any summing up?
Chair, sorry, I was just looking hopefully for an answer, Nikki, just on the state of play with the old building at Wick.
Nikki?
Councillor Rees, what I'll do is I'll need to get back to you on that. Okay, I'll send you an email after the meeting once a time with officers, if that's okay.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, Councillor Raymond Bremner.
Yeah, can I just ask Councillor Rees what kind of update he was looking at? Are you talking about the update on the state of progress with the auction, the fact that it's been members in Ward 3 have given their authorisation for it to be put up to auction with an asking price of 50,000. Are you looking at that's already moving forward? Are you looking for an update in terms of how the auction's going, if there's been any interest in it?
Thanks, Councillor Rees has to, metaphorically speaking, grovel, although I did say it's not my ward and I was conscious I was slightly butting. I was looking for anything that might be good news whatsoever regarding that site. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Raymond, for that. Yes, Christine, Nikki and Roger, thank you so much. Any of you really want to contribute a little summing up to the meeting? Have you anything further for us to enjoy? Are you all quite happy?
Chair, can I make one final comment?
Yes, come in, Raymond.
Actually, the point about Wick High School, Nikki, could you possibly note that we often see, and this is actually for housing and property, I suppose, but it very much pertains to the to new school build programs, where they actually, as far as I am aware, the new school build programs usually consider what the disposal of the old building is going to be. Now there were considerable issues, which we won't go into, embarrassing issues that didn't allow us to dispose of the Wick High School. But as I understood, the original proposals actually catered for the disposal by Highland Council of the old Wick High School building, and I don't think it was by auction at 50 grand. So can we raise it with Housing and Property that we must actually actively look at the disposal of the former sites once new schools and new buildings are built, because it causes us problems. The public expects us to deal with it that way. We are not doing it, and we're not doing it very well. So Housing and Property, we need to get our act together there. I know it can be cause constraints on the budget, but that's usually more through bad planning than it is through the fact that we've just said that, you know what, we'll dispose of it privately at the end of it. That's happened with several of the sites. And finally, Chair, we've got to look at how we actually, once we do dispose of them, who's actually buying them? What are they doing with them? And is the end state, given the folks that we sell it to, is it going to enhance our environment, or is it going to still adversely impact on it? You look at some of the schools that we've actually got rid of and what they've turned into. They are no more complementary to the environment that they sit in just now than they were previously as the eyesore that they were. There's nothing better about them. They're an absolute eyesore in Wick, and an unwelcome one at times. So maybe that's something that Housing and Property can reflect on going forward. And I'm sorry to be such a gurn today, by the way, everybody.
Not at all, Rima, not at all. It's a very valid points made there. Absolutely excellent. Nikki, you agree?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bremner. And I've just, what I'll do is I'll send an email to the ECO for Property and Infrastructure just to get a bit of an input for you. Okay, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But Councillor Mackay, thank you for giving us the opportunity to celebrate the successes of our young people. It's not just about the academic successes, and I know that the Summer of Hope programme, which was in Caithness, was very successful too, and it was aimed at targeting some of our most vulnerable young people and families. So we look forward to all of our children and young people returning safely to school next week, and hopefully we'll have another positive 21-22 year, building on the successes that we've had. So just thank you for all your support.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Thank you for the report. Indeed, I do notice on page 28, High Life Highland are easing restrictions along government guidelines and online booking. So that's opening up a whole a range of facilities there, making it much more easier for members and the public to access. Well done. As we move on, thank you, Christine, Roger and Nikki for attending and speaking to this report and asking and questions, etc., and answering them to the members today. Well done indeed. Members, we are asked to scrutinise and note the content of the report here today. Agreed? Well done. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on to the final item for today. We have got in front of us the draft Wick Portney Town Conservation Area Appraisal and Conservation Area Management Plan. Now, have we got Andrew, are you with us? Yes, you are. Andrew Pulse, yes.
I am with you, Chair. Yeah.
Well done, Andrew, the Environmental Manager and Conservation Officer. Delighted to have you with us, Andrew. I know you put a tremendous amount of work into this report, detailed, absolutely fantastic. So if you have any more news to add to us, you go ahead, and perhaps the members will come in with some questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, good afternoon, members. You will have seen already both of these reports previously when presented to this committee prior to the public consultation. Just to let you know, there have been no significant changes following the consultation, other than the removal of the harbour area from the proposed conservation area boundary, but I'll come back to that in just a second, if that's okay. So just as a very quick bit of background, we as a local authority, we have a statutory duty under the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Scotland Act to formulate and publish proposals for the preservation, management and enhancement of our conservation areas. And these reports have been produced to satisfy this duty for Pulteney Town. In this case, these reports, they actually also fulfil a requirement of funding received from Heritage Lottery Fund and also Historic Environment Scotland for the Townscape Heritage Scheme and also the Conservation Area Regeneration Schemes, which took place over the last 10 years or so. So this is also, and very importantly, actually satisfies that condition of grant funding and ensures that those projects can also be wrapped up. So they were undertaken primarily by a conservation accredited consultant, and given the grant funded schemes that have been in operation over the last 10 years or so, we felt it would be helpful to have an independent assessment of the conservation area to highlight where funding has been successful in improving the built environment, but also where there are problems and issues remain unaddressed and where future regeneration efforts should be focused to best effect. As I noticed that Councillor Rees rightly highlights under the previous item, and as I entirely appreciate, these are very long and detailed reports. This really reflects the significance and the outstanding importance of this particular conservation area, and also the complicated issues that it presents. We do normally try and keep them much more concise and smaller, and Pulteney Town is something of an exception in this respect. So, as mentioned, with regard to the content of the reports, the only significant change is the removal of the harbour from the conservation area boundary as proposed. This was following a couple of online meetings we had with the Harbour Authority and their legal advisors during the consultation period. Discussions were generally very positive, actually, and we all agreed on the importance of the harbour for Pulteney Town more generally. But the Harbour Authority were particularly concerned about the conservation area designation curtailing their permitted development rights. We as a local authority didn't really feel that those we understood those concerns, but we didn't feel those concerns were necessarily justified, as we have no intention of curtailing their permitted development rights, but nonetheless understand that the conservation area designation would potentially allow future officers to curtail those permitted development rights in the future. So although there's no intention on our part to do this, we do accept why this may be of concern. So while the harbour does meet historically, architecturally, in terms of its character and appearance, it's a key part of Pulteney Town. We've balanced this by also considering the existing acts and the provisions that govern the activities of the Harbour Authority, and that in this context, designation as a conservation area would actually have very limited impact and very limited positive effects. It would provide very few safeguards or opportunities. So on balance, it was felt the harbour area can be excluded from the conservation area without any real risk of detriment to its character. But nonetheless, the discussions we had were, like I say, they were really helpful. They were really positive, and we hope to improve dialogue essentially with the Harbour Authority and look for mutually beneficial opportunities to enhance the appearance of the harbour where it's possible to do so, even though it's not going to be within the conservation area. If I can just make a very quick observation on the level of feedback received following the consultation, because on the face of it, I'm quite aware that it might seem that we've had very little feedback on the consultation. And this is true, but the reason being is from the start of this project, we really made a significant effort to prioritise community engagement and involvement. And the reports themselves have been informed and developed in tandem with a stakeholder group that was made up of local representatives throughout. I think the membership is listed in the paper. It's really very wide ranging. And it played a really active role in the project and very much influenced the direction of the reports, and especially the issues identified in the management plan, actually. And their input throughout has been absolutely invaluable. And also before COVID, we were very fortunate to have the opportunity for extensive public engagement also at this point, and that was both through the steering group and also through a number of face-to-face meetings. And we also held public drop-in sessions in Pulteney Town as well, where both the officers and the consultant had the opportunity to meet and hear any concerns of local residents and, where possible, address those concerns. Although interestingly enough, it has to be said that the majority of people who attended were nothing but positive and supportive, and actually really pleased that Pulteney Town was being recognised as the uniquely important place that it is. All of the stakeholders, they were given sight of and asked to comment on the pre-consultation draft as well, and we know this was circulated amongst their contacts also. So there's been a widespread knowledge and understanding of the documents within the local community right from the outset. And this included the recommendation to extend the conservation area boundary slightly, and lots of work done to incorporate the views of stakeholders before we released the reports for public consultation. So it was a very conscious and as it turns out, somewhat fortuitous decision to try and front load the consultation phase and reach as many of the stakeholders as possible to get in front of the issues before they arose. And I think that's been really, really quite successful. And it's something we'll definitely, it's the same format we'll be following in future conservation area appraisals as well. It's it worked really, really well. For the consultation itself, we did the usual things we were required to do: adverts in the local press. We advertised the consultation through social media. The stakeholder group were asked to raise awareness and share the consultation amongst their own contacts. And although we have no requirement to do so, members at the last meeting I was at, they asked us to write to every property in the existing and proposed conservation area to advise them of the consultation also. So every property was notified by letter that this was taking place. We also had our consultant travel to Wick between the lockdowns to meet with stakeholders to discuss the reports. So despite the restrictions in place at the time, we still managed to retain a degree of face-to-face contact, less than we'd have liked, and it was obviously socially distanced, but it still allowed that connection between what we're doing with the conservation area and the local residents. We did receive some informal feedback from a number, which I'm not sure if I've mentioned in the paper, but it was actually really nice. They took the time to actually thank the team for the hard work in pulling together the history of Pulteney Town, especially, and especially how that related to its built heritage and how the uses of the buildings have changed over time. And much of the history of Pulteney Town they were finding out about for the first time. So that was really, really pleasing, and I think it's helped sort of build that pride in the area. So if members are content with the reports and the recommendations, the next step will be to present this to the Infrastructure, Environment and Economy Committee next month for final adoption. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, for that very detailed, comprehensive report. Absolutely impressive indeed. And I do know you put a power of work into this. Councillor Raymond Bremner, would you like to come in?
Yes, I would. Thanks, Andrew, for the report and for your ongoing work with it, and also the fact that you've been to committee with us before. A number of us gave our overviews at that time, so I won't go into that. What was particularly noted in this is the report section 6.1, section 6, the consultation report, which refers to the, as you know, we had quite a lot of representation from the Wick Harbour Authority and what they believed was going to be the constraints that could well be imposed on them. The nature of the development and the potential nature of development there, which the community, ourselves as members, believe is going to be really important to the economy, the local economy of Wick, and indeed the greater economy of Caithness. I am pleased to see that section and the references and what has been happening with the dialogue and discussion with the Wick Harbour Authority. I'm sure that they'll be pleased as well. I have two questions. The first one is: do we still believe that the greater conservation area is not going to be so restrictive on individual development ideas, given the fact that the town does face challenges in being able to diversify and to improve and improve its look and the well-being of its residents. So where they're looking to develop, that it's not going to be so restrictive on them, especially in the lower Pulteney Town area, which was already part of the conservation area. And the second question, if we endorse this today, when it goes to committee, it still can be amended at committee if other further representations are made between now and then. Is that correct? Thank you.
Would you like me to come back up on those questions now, Jeff?
Yes, Andrew, if you could.
Absolutely. Okay. The idea of the conservation area, and especially within the context of Pulteney Town, is to make the area as vibrant and as and as attractive and work and visit as possible. So it's absolutely not the idea to restrict development and to restrict ideas. We want to bring people back into the area. We want to take vacant and redundant buildings and give them life again, put people back into them, put businesses back into them. So the driving ethos really of the conservation area, as has been the TH scheme and the CAR scheme, which came before, is to really try and revitalise Pulteney Town, excuse me, especially lower Pulteney Town, where we still do see a lot of vacant and derelict buildings, and bringing those back to life. Bringing them back to life sensitively, yes, but bringing them back to life in a way which galvanizes the rest of the local community to do similar to have similar projects to develop in a similar way, in the same way that we've seen with the Beatrice buildings on the Harbour front, and the outstanding job they've done in renovating those two listed buildings, and try and see that being replicated elsewhere. So absolutely not about restricting people. It's about finding it is about sensitive development, it is about appropriate development, but it is ultimately about bringing people back into Pulteney Town and reducing vacancy rates, reducing dereliction, and finding new uses for buildings which otherwise have sat empty for many, many years. So that's the driving force, and that's what we really, really want to see happen. As for the it going to the Infrastructure, Environment and Economy Committee, this is the end of the consultation period, so the report will go in its current format. If members wish to make amendments, you are of course able to do so. That's absolutely fine, and we'll make those amendments before we take it to the next committee for final adoption. But the public consultation period has ended, unless anything comes from yourselves, of course.
Okay, Raymond, you're quite happy with that?
Yes, I am. That's all my questions asked and answered.
Thank you for that, Raymond. Thank you, Andrew.
Chair, you've got on mute, but I'm guessing you were either asking myself or Donny to speak.
Oh, yes, sorry, yes. Sorry, yes, Councillor Matthew Rees, would you like to speak to this? Or have you got a question for Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to speak to it. I'm again conscious it's not my ward, so I really just wanted to say, when I first came to Caithness in 1985, I lived in Salton Street in Wick, just there by the harbour. And Andrew, please don't apologise for the length of the your agenda item. I mean, it's fascinating reading. I mean, I really recommend it. If there are any members who haven't quite read every page, it's really interesting stuff. And some of the photographs about the architecture, it's really, really interesting. And I kind of wish the Wick as well with this, with all the projects and the intentions that are there. The town's on the North Coast 500. You've got incredible heritage, part of it Norse even, in Wick, and it's a great place, as Councillor Bremner would agree. And I think, continuing in the positive vein, if you look at what Beatrice has done down there at the harbour, it is fantastic with capital letters. It has been done and executed brilliantly in my view. It's maintained the character, but it's put those abandoned buildings back to use. And as a doing night shift in Wick in the police back in the 1980s, used to wander around those abandoned derelict buildings, getting scared out of your skin by stray cats leaping out from corners and things. And, you know, the place was literally a ruin. And now, slowly but surely, it's coming back to life. And there's a lot more, as I think Raymond said or alluded to, you know, there's so much potential, so much to be done, but things are moving in the right direction. And I'd just like to, if I may, just mention very nearby Wick Heritage Centre. And you know, that the Heritage Centre in one respect sums up, I think, so much that is good about Wick and Pulteney in particular. It was so good that a few years ago when I took my elderly father there, we had the greatest of difficulty in extricating him from the centre because there was so much he wanted to see and read and learn about. And really the whole of Pulteney there is it's such a good cause, and it's incredibly uplifting from the other side of the county to see the work that's going on there. So thank you, and best wishes, Andrew, to yourself and your colleagues with this work. Sorry, I should have said, Chair, I'm also reassured. I have in the past criticised the lack of democracy regarding some of the big renewables projects, some, not all. But actually, when you look at the detail, the things that we're entrusted with the planning committee and with the planning review body, I am convinced, you know, that any development, if it was appropriate or not, you know, we have a lot of power already to control that. And I think, Andrew, I don't think you need to worry about, you know, if we think there's something good that can happen. I think this is something members are quite good at, is sort of exercising a pragmatic approach to applications within conservation areas. Thank you again.
Thank you for that, Matthew. Thank you. And we'll move on. Before you sum up, we've got Councillor Donnie Mackay, and then we'll have Councillor Carl Rossi.
Hello, Andrew. It's not about work, so you're free. I'm talking about now Thursday. When is Thursday going to be done? Thank you, Andrew. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, and Carl Rossi.
Thanks. Well, good morning, Andrew. It's very much in the same vein. I think you advised us that we can expect a report for Thursday very soon. I'm sure you'll tell me if I'm wrong, but look, you know, I'm a Thursday councillor, but I think it's a fantastic report, and I think it's really important the comments you make about, you know, the intentions to make it vibrant and attractive as possible. You know, and that's why I look forward to the report for Thursday. A really interesting thing, and I've been critical in the past, Andrew, when you commented about the relatively low response and the reasoning you gave. You know, it's clear why that's happened and the rationale you gave. So well done in doing that. So as I say, I really look forward to Thursday report, and thank you very much.
Andrew, would you like to sum up? Thank you, members.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I too would like to give a big thank you to Wick Heritage Centre, and also just the knowledge that they possess there, and they really are quite extraordinary with the collections they hold and the information they have, and I would agree with Councillor Rees, they really are really quite an important part of Wick and Pulteney Town in particular, and holding the history that they do, and we couldn't have included lots of the images that we have done without them, and a lot of the information came directly from them as well, so they've been absolutely key to this. So yeah, big thank you to them. I have some good news on Thursday. You'll be pleased to know, I hope, Councillor Mckay, Councillor Rossi. Just this morning, I had confirmation from the Scrutiny Board that a authority to recruit that I'd submitted some time ago has actually been given permission for a part-time, fixed-term conservation area project officer post. And the first thing on their list of things to do will be Thursday. So as soon as they come into post, which hopefully will be, I think it's going out to advert later this month. So before the end of 2021, we'll have them working on Thursday, and we should have something to you, hopefully at a committee early 2022. Fingers crossed.
Fantastic.
Well done. Well done, members. No further questions or comments? Okay, Andrew, thank you very much indeed for that comprehensive report. Absolutely well done. Members, we are asked today to note the public comments and agree the council response and recommend that the Infrastructure, Environment and Economy Committee formally adopt of Wick Pulteney Conservation Area Appraisal and Appendix 1 and Management Plan Appendix 2, including the amended conservation area boundary at a forthcoming meeting. Members agreed?
Agreed.
Well done. Thank you, Andrew. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Alison, are you still there? Thank you very much for attending today. Alison Clark, thank you very much for being with us here today. And thanks to all the officers for the reports, which are very detailed indeed. Members, thank you all for attending and contributing to the agenda items. It's been a great pleasure being the Deputy Chair on this occasion. And I'm going to finish the way I started, which is always a good way to round up. And I'm going to wish all the candidates here today at the by-election all the best of success. And I look forward tomorrow, and Caithness will have once again a full complement of 8 councillors. Thank you, and bye for now.